What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? Dbacks look to finish the month strong against the Washington Nationals as AJ Puk delivers in his debut this past weekend for the Dbacks against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then why not play a little game of dream versus realistic targets for the Dbacks this MLB trade deadline?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, a multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. On today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about the D-backs handling the Pirates and how they can finish the month strong against the Washington Nationals. Dream versus realistic trade targets this MLB deadline. And then, of course, first podcast of the week, gotta do the D-backs panic meter. So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about on today's podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now let's talk about the D-backs next series and how they just looked in their most previous series against the Pittsburgh Pirates, because the D-backs were able to handle their business against Pittsburgh. We said, like we've talked about all month when looking at the schedule, a lot of these teams in vulnerable situations. The Pirates are definitely a team right now that feels like they want to make it to the postseason. Feels like they're going to go out there and try to win every game, but sometimes the schedule just lines up perfectly for the opposing team, as it did for the D-backs, because the Pirates, the first two games, unfortunately, were without Brian Reynolds. The D-backs got to avoid a Paul Skeens in this series. It was honestly set up perfectly for the D-backs to go in there and win against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and that's what the D-backs were able to do. Win another series, really take it to the Pirates the first two games, and now they are set up to potentially not lose a series the entire month of July, as they face one team left in the Washington Nationals, and the Nationals, a team themselves, probably not trying to win too many games in the second half of the season. You're already starting to see them sell off some of their players, like the Jesse Winkers, and it feels like the Nationals will probably sell a few more guys before the deadline is over. Maybe the D-backs can even acquire one of those national players, as we might discuss that in segment number 2. But D-backs right now perfectly in line to potentially not have a losing month. You beat the Dodgers, you beat the Padres, you split against the Braves, so you didn't lose to them, and you beat the Blue Jays, the Cubs, the Royals, the Pirates, and now the Nationals. And that's a very different group of, when you go through the whole schedule throughout this month, that's a very nice, diverse portfolio of teams you beat. The Dodgers are arguably the best team in the National League. We know they're at least the best team in the NL West. Yes, they were very injury prone at the time, but still laden, star-laden lineup. The Padres, again, they're down like the Fernando Tatises, but they're also still playing very good baseball. They just had Dylan Cease throw a no-no. Like, that's still a very good team to beat, especially a team that's directly in your way in the wild card race. You needed that victory. Splitting the 4-game set against the Braves was much needed. Then the Blue Jays, like, yes, not a team having the greatest year, look like they're going to be trade deadline sellers, but still not a series where you want to take them lightly, as they still have good starting pitching and still some dudes in that lineup where if they get a hold of one, they could take it deep. The Cubs are a team that feels like they should be sellers, but right now look like buyers, as they went out there and got Paredes this past week. The Cubs are not that far back from a spot in the postseason. So that's still a team that you need to beat. The Royals are one of the best teams in the American League. They just made another move by acquiring Michael Lorenzen, I believe. So when you think about all these teams, the Pirates are only a couple games back of the D-backs. Like if they lost this series against the Pirates, like they would have been within one game of a wild card spot. So you go back and look at the portfolio for the month of July for the D-backs of the teams that you've been in. Outside of the Blue Jays, like it's been a very nice group of teams. Dodgers above 500, Padres, Braves, Royals. Those are all teams above 500. Then at least the Pirates and Cubs are also in the NL wildcard race. And so this was a very nice group of teams that the D-backs have been able to beat in the month of July. And now you go against a squad in the Washington Nationals who are probably a little bit, not trying to win too many games right now. Probably second half tank mode, sell some players off at the deadline. And you got such a nice young core if you're Washington. Just keep adding players of the young variety to your team. Go out there, acquire more prospects, call some people up in the second half of the season, and just see what you have with the players already on your roster if you're Washington. So for the D-backs who are in desperate need of games and wins to keep pacing that NL wildcard race, I think they will go and take advantage of the Nationals in this series. I love what they did against the Pirates. They played the first two games perfectly. I think we really saw the answer backs in the series against Pittsburgh. And we've seen the answer backs a ton in the month of July. They responded in every situation the first two games of the series. Lourdes Gurriel, Jake McCarthy, both had very strong series against Pittsburgh. Jake had 6 hits in 9 at-bats. He went 5 for 5 in game number 2. Phenomenal. Lourdes Gurriel, he was 5 for 10 in at-bats this past weekend. 3 runs, and of course, the D-backs tried to make that comeback in the finale in extra innings. Fell a little bit short, but Lourdes Gurriel, home run in extra innings, tried to keep the D-backs alive. We also saw the debut of newly acquired reliever A.J. Puck, and this is a guy who can rush it up, throw mid-90s, can get some strikeouts, very good strikeout numbers as well, as we saw in game number 2 as he struck out the side. We love AJ Puck and what he's going to be able to bring to this D-backs team going forward, because AJ Puck, much needed lefty reliever for the D-backs in their pen. Struck out the side in the finale against the Pirates. And we know Mantiply couldn't be the only lefty reliever for the D-backs in big situations. D-backs needed one more, and they were able to go out there and acquire one in AJ Puck, who looked fantastic in his debut. Zach Gallen battled against the Pirates, but still don't feel great about him. We need to get elite Zach Gallen back. Brendan Pfaadt, he was also not the greatest in his start, but I feel fine about Pfaadt going forward, not worried about him. And Gilbert Diaz, still a big fan of Gilbert. I think he's been a very nice little rotation piece. Does he give up too many walks? Maybe, but 7 Ks, 1 hit in 5 innings. Like, I'll definitely take those numbers from Gilbert Diaz. So rotation feels like it's in a fine spot right now. Can be a little bit better. There's definitely more of a ceiling to the rotation than what we're currently ceiling, but at least like the floor of the starters as well. D-backs have now a chance to finish the month strong against the Nationals, who are up next. In this series, I want to see Christian Walker and Geraldo Perdomo get going, because they only had 1 hit apiece in this most recent series, so they need to be a little bit better. We got Monty, Ryan Nelson, and Zach Gallen on tap for the next 3 days, so I really like how the rotation is set up. Monty's coming off a solid start last week. Want to build off of that. Huge wild card player in the second half of the season for the D-backs. Need to get Zach Gallen back on track. Ryan Nelson, he just needs to keep doing what he's doing, and the D-backs should handle this series against the Nationals. And maybe they'll even get a couple reinforcements to help them get a series win, because we'll talk about trade deadline targets, dream versus reality, in segment number 2. But before we get into that, if you're looking for clothes, then I suggest Stitch Fix, because you know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They all do the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. My stylist always sends just for right pieces, and the fit is on point. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. I don't like to shop, and they save me that time and effort. Plus, I get outfits that make me look and feel really good. And if you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Offer does not include kids fixes. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's talk about dream versus realistic trade targets for the Dbacks. We'll go through some guys who are the best case scenario. If the Dbacks land this major needle mover, give the Dbacks a potential World Series trophy. Like, it's the kind of move that puts you over the top if you're a contender, the kind of splash play where you get that Jeff Passan bomb and the other Locked On hosts in the NL West are like, oh my God, the D-backs just did it. Meanwhile, the realistic option is like, you know what? That's a good move. Should help out the D-backs in the long run. Could be a cherry on top to a roster, but also if it didn't work out for the D-backs, you wouldn't be too surprised, or you're just like, yes, winning, good move, but not exactly causing earthquakes in the NL West community. So we'll go through some few dream versus realistic trade candidates, and I want to start with some pitchers. The first dream candidate that I want to talk about is a guy currently on the Chicago White Sox, a little Garrett Crochet, who was having himself a fantastic season, and this might be the hottest name on the trade market right now because of how talented this guy is. Lefty starter, has a pretty nasty arsenal as well. Can throw mid 90s, can touch 97. That's what he averages on his fastball. So he can definitely touch higher than that. Averages 97 on the fastball. Not a free agent until 2027. So he's cost controlled for the next couple of years. This is a guy who is currently leading the American League in strikeouts, leading the American League in FIP, having himself a fantastic season. And he's a lefty that would be an immediate upgrade over what Jordan Montgomery has produced this year, or potentially what Erod can do for the D-backs if he ever came back. Like, when we talk about needle movers, this is a guy that will come in and immediately be one of, if not the best D-back starter, if you're putting it into a vacuum of this season. He's been better than Zach Allen this season. He's been better than a Brandon Pfaadt. Like, Garrett Crochet, I think when the rotation is fully healthy, like, he should probably be the number 3 starter behind a Gallen and a Kelly, but based off the way he's pitching this year, right now, he should potentially be the D-backs number 1 starter. And if the D-backs trade for him, he would at least be the number 2 starter. Imagine a guy like Brandon Pfaadt gets pushed back to the number 3. But think about Crochet, not just for this season, but all of a sudden you trade for him. He's a long-term piece now as well. Crochet is only 25 years old. So when you think about Gallen, who's in his late 20s, mixed with a Pfaadt and a Crochet is your 1, 2, 3 for the next 3 to 4 years. You still got Erod on a deal for the next 4 years. Kelly's signed for the next couple years. Monty, I think, has an option for next year. Like, yes, you would have to make a decision this offseason probably of who to get rid of from your rotation. But regardless, for this season, at least you would have one of the nastiest 6-man rotations, I guess, assuming everyone's fully healthy. But the biggest reason I would do this deal just because of the age and the quality of talent that Crochet is. If you can have Gallen, Pfaadt, and Crochet for like the next 5 years, that's a legit 1, 2, 3 in your rotation. And that's why I would not be afraid at all to go and get a Garrett Crochet. Now, he's definitely going to be expensive. It sounds like there's a lot of teams in on Garrett Crochet, and doesn't sound like the Chicago White Sox are in desperate need of moving him. It sounds like they're fine keeping him for this season. Like I said, entering arbitration 2025. So they still got him cost control for the next couple of years, so they could wait it out with a Crochet, see if they get better as a team in the next couple of years. And if they don't, then maybe trade him next year or the year after. It's not like they have to do it this year. This is really the first big breakout season of Crochet, so maybe that makes some teams hesitant, and maybe that could be a little bit of a reason why he could be a little bit cheaper than a lot of guys of Crochet's talent, just because he doesn't have a long track record of being great. But regardless, if the D-backs did acquire him, it would probably be expensive. It would probably not come cheap, but he's the kind of guy that could be a major needle mover in the National League wildcard race, in the National League overall, and would be a long-term piece for the D-backs. We're talking about a realistic option, though, probably looking at like a Jack Flaherty from the Pittsburgh Pirates, or excuse me, not the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Detroit Tigers, who is having himself a fantastic season. This is not someone who I've really thought highly of because he's only had like a couple of really good years. Like 2019 is a year that we all talk about. Like really, his first couple years of baseball. 2018, he finished 5th in Rookie of the Year, fantastic season. 2019, finished 4th in Cy Young voting, fantastic season. But then you look at his numbers since 2019, and he's just been a mediocre pitcher ever since then. 2021, he would have been good, but it was cut short due to injury. Then the last couple years prior to 2021, 2022 and 2023, just not good. He was also not good in the COVID-shortened season. So prior to 2024, you could have said 3 of the last 4 years, he's been a below average major leaguer. And that was fine to say. He was a dude that gave up a lot of walks, a lot of hits, and a decent amount of home runs. Now, this season, you look at Jack Flaherty's numbers, he's cut down the hit rate a whole ton. He's cut down a walk rate a whole ton, and he has a career high in strikeout rate as well. With a sub-3 ERA, Jack Flaherty is having a fantastic season. And as a guy who's on a 1-year rental, who's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, could be a perfect addition to this D-backs team where Erod is coming back. Like, this whole rotation that the D-backs have of guys who are playing, who are hurt, they're all coming back next year, right? Monty, Erod, Kelly, Gallen, Fott, I expect them all to come back next year. But with all the question marks of Monty's up and down play this season and Erod and Merrill Kelly's health, a guy like Jack Flaherty, who is a 1-year rental having a great season, could be the perfect guy to bring in and say, listen, all we need is Gallen, Fott, and Flaherty to be good, and then just one of Monty, Kelly, and Erod to pick it up once we get to the postseason, most likely Merrill Kelly, and then that's your 4-man rotation for the playoffs. Erod, you've been too hurt this season. We haven't seen enough of you. You're going to the bullpen. Same with Jordan Montgomery. You're also going to be going to the bullpen. Obviously, they could be the number 5 starter if it comes to that in a postseason setting, which it normally does not. But both of those guys, I think, would lose to Jack Flaherty right now if you're building a postseason pen because of how good he's been this year, the up and down nature of Monty, and the questionable health of Erod. This could be a perfect 1-year addition that could help the D-backs go over the edge. And then once you get to the offseason, as a guy who is only 28 years old, maybe you decide to keep him over a Monty and Erod. That's a discussion that the D-backs would have to have. Or you just bring back the rotation that you thought you were going to have entering 2024, and then you could let Flaherty walk. Thank him for his services of potentially delivering a World Series trophy, and then the D-backs can wash their hands of it. So for the D-backs, I think either one is a fantastic option. Garrett Crochet is the dream. Meanwhile, Jack Flaherty is the realistic option. And still, a guy like Jack Flaherty, despite being a 1-year rental, I still think he would cost something because of how good he's been this year. And so Flaherty, I would love to add to the D-backs as a 1-year rental. I would not be mad at all if the D-backs want to go in that direction because I do think he's having a good season. I don't want to add a 1-year rental that just is going to be a 1-year rental. I want him to be good. I want him to be better than the guys that are currently in the rotation because if we're just trading to trade, I would rather just stay with the Ryan Nelsons and the Yulbert Diaz's of the world if it's not an immediate upgrade. And I would say Flaherty's an upgrade over those two guys. So wouldn't mind Flaherty, but the other potential realistic trade candidates we'll have to have a longer discussion about. And I want to talk about 2 more pitchers that I have down as a dream versus realistic target before we do the panic meter in segment number 3. And hey, if you're looking to get some supplies, then I suggest Supply House because get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouses.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. I'm going to give you two more dream versus realistic targets. I actually have a few more guys on this list that we won't get to today, so I'll save them for other pods in this week, assuming they don't get traded before the deadline. So we'll do one tomorrow and potentially one on the day of the deadline. If I could get one out earlier, probably just do a mega one, I'm guessing Tuesday for the 30th, the day before the deadline. I'll give you guys a major list of potential dream versus realistic targets. But two more that I want to give you. The dream guy. How about a Tarik Skubal? I think I'm pronouncing his name a little bit wrong, but either way, this guy is an absolute stud and has really come into his own as one of the best pitchers in the American League, and this has been building over the last 3 years. Now, his problem is a little Tyler Glasnow-ish. When you look at the career numbers, has never really pitched a ton of innings. 2022 was kind of the start of his ascent, and actually, if you just look at every single season, his ERA has gotten better by the year, which is actually kind of funny. 2020 COVID-shortened season, which is his debut year, 5.63 ERA in 32 innings, of course, 2020. But now, 2021, 149 innings pitched, 4.34 ERA. 2022, 117 innings pitched, 3.52 ERA. 2023, 80 innings pitched, 2.8 ERA. And then this season, 130 innings pitched, leads the AL in ERA with a 2.35 and leads the AL in wins with a 12. Every single season, his ERA has gotten better. And the other thing with Tarik Skubal, is he's a strikeout machine. He's absolutely elite when it comes to command and control. The walk rate numbers are good, 1.7 walks per 9, double-digit strikeouts per 9, a sub-1 whip. Like, all that is great. But like I said, a little Glasnow-esque, because when I went through the stats right now, the career high in innings pitched was 2021 with 149. He will probably crush that this season as he's already at 130 innings, but still, Tarik Skubal is not a guy who has really has a track record of pitching deep into seasons, and that could be a little bit of a concern if you're trading for him. But he's still, just like Crochet, cost control through 2027, arbitration in 2025 in the next couple of years. He's still a guy only 27 years old in the prime of his career. So when you think about the Dbacks and the long-term fit, just like a Crochet, if you have Gallen, Fott, and Skubal for the next 5 years, like, that's a pretty elite 1-2-3 in your rotation. Skubal's having a fantastic season, and I do think, like Crochet, he would be very expensive, so that's the one thing you have to think about. But if you can add him, again, just like a Crochet, that's a piece to put you over the top as a major needle mover. And if you're thinking about a more realistic option, how about like a Yusei Kikuchi? I can see the D-backs doing a move like this just because he's a seasoned veteran. He's the guy that could just be a hold it down dude until you get your rotation healthy again. He's the kind of guy that maybe you don't, steal the job from an Erod and Kelly. Maybe he is just a true rental bridge gap until the rest of your rotation gets healthy and back on track. He's got double-digit strikeouts per 9 this season. He had a pretty good year in 2023. Like, he's been fine this season. 4.75, not great, just fine. But again, it's like what I was questioning in segment number 2. Is Kikuchi definitively better than Ryan Nelson or Yolbert Diaz? Like, I don't really think so. That's why I'm like, a realistic option like this, I think I'd rather just stay with the in-house options than go with the Kikuchi. I don't know if that's a big enough upgrade for me. The D-backs are going to go with a realistic trade candidate. I would want it to be a one-year rental like who we just discussed in a Jack Flaherty. Or maybe you go out there and look for like a Tyler Anderson, something like that. But a guy like Kikuchi, I don't think is good enough. I'd rather stay with the in-house options. If I'm trading for someone, like I mentioned, it has to be a clear upgrade if I have to give up pieces for them. Otherwise, I'll rather ride with who I already have in the D-backs clubhouse. Now, before we wrap, let's get into a little panic meter because I believe on the last panic meter, we had the D-backs at a 3. I'm actually going to move that number up 1 to a 4 because despite the D-backs playing great recently, it has not really affected the standings too much, and that's why I have to move it up 1. It's not like I'm worried about the D-backs not making to the postseason, but despite them having like the best record in baseball since the 29th, there's still a half game back of the wild card. Teams like the Padres, the Mets, and Braves are still continuing to play good baseball overall. And so for the D-backs, it's hard for them to break into that wild card spot right now. I'm still in on the D-backs making into the postseason in the second half of the year, but the fact that they keep winning games and it hasn't really moved them up in the standings too much does make me a little bit concerned, but not too much, only at 4, because I still think they're more talented than the other teams that they're going against in the NL wildcard race. But the other reason I moved it up 1 is because it seems like the other teams in the NL wildcard race are trying to get better this deadline. We see the Mets out there making moves, adding a Jesse Winker. We know the Padres are probably going to do something. Would not be surprised at all if they did. Maybe if you're the Braves, all of a sudden the Mets are on your heels trying to take your spot in the wildcard race. If you're the Cardinals, they've already added some talent at this deadline. The Pirates as well. So I would not be surprised if the other teams in this NL wildcard race start to acquire more talent this deadline. That's why I have the panic meter as a 4 for the D-backs, because despite them playing great baseball and me feeling very confident in this team right now, it's the rest of the NL that's starting to make me a little bit more concerned with how they're playing and how aggressive they're trying to be at this year's deadline. That's why the panic meter is at a 4 currently. Now, I'll come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. We'll talk about more dream versus realistic trade candidates for the D-backs this MLB deadline. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.